Welcome, folks, to another episode of Who's Ghost Stories. I am your host, medium and Reiki master, Andrew Huzar of Huzar Reiki and Readings. We've got our research expert, Sean, and over here, we've got paranormal enthusiast, cryptid expert, currently lit by a phone or else he'll go into black and white, Professor Alex Wheaton. Not ideal, but it's hot up here, so if I bust out the filming lights I use for Screw Hammerton, we're going to be roasting.
Yeah, and this is our first time filming up here, not during the day.
Yeah.
So it's a learning experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Alex cam might not see too much action. You never know.
It might be a little moody in here.
I'm okay with it being black and white.
Worst case scenario,
Did you just ooh?
Yeah.
Sorry.
As always, check out our sponsors, Spirit Magica. Link in the description. Use coupon code WHO'sR11. Get yourself a nice little discount on any crystals you might want. And then take a little trip over to Pet Art Creations and order yourself a gift or a gift for somebody else of a custom painting of a loved pet or loved one.
This is the first time you mentioned what the discount code was.
It's been in different orders. You never know when it's coming out.
That's fair. I just wanted to make sure. I was like, you didn't mention it earlier. Apologies now that this episode is already off the rails.
Yep.
But
We'll try to rein it back in.
it's going to be hard because I have certain feelings about the episode I had to watch as research for this, so we're going to dive right in. Senior Sean, kick it off.
The Riverside Inn was constructed in the late 1880s as a hotel and dinner theater. It was located in Cambridge Springs in Crawford County. The hotel was opened in 1888 and was promoted as lodging near the mineral springs. The mineral springs were said to be an elixir for the ailments of the day. At the height of mineral springs, there were over 40 hotels in the area. After the American Medical Association determined there to be no therapeutic properties to the springs, only the Riverside Inn remained. The hotel would be added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1978. Though the mineral springs may not have been curing ailments, it is theorized that they may have attracted paranormal spirits.
Throughout the 127 years that the Riverside Inn was in operation, it had many guests. It is said that some of these guests never left the inn. Guests and employees have had many experiences of unexplained phenomena. People have heard music coming from the ballroom when nobody was performing, as well as apparitions dancing. The form of a male and female spirits have been sighted throughout the hotel. The creepiest recurrence is a spirit that would crawl into bed with guests at night. In 2013, the Riverside was the subject of an episode of the Dead Files.
I like the way you said that.
I don't know if I could say it seriously.
Sadly, the Riverside would burn down on May 2nd, 2017. The fire broke out in the kitchen, and due to it having no modern fire breaks, the fire was too much for the firefighters to extinguish. Throughout the final 7 years of its existence, the hotel would embrace the unexplained occurrences. They would host haunted sleepovers where amateurs could use professional equipment to have their own investigation and welcome paranormal investigators to visit the location. While the loss of the Riverside is a tragedy for the living, we do hope that the spirits residing at the inn have found new lodging for their last resort.
So, I watched the Dead Files episode on this.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. You can go check it out if you want. It's on Discovery Plus. But they did give some extra information that I'll just kind of go over quickly here before we start talking about things. I'm going to go through the historical stuff, and then I'll mention the ghostly stuff a little later. So the spring water was very, very high in magnesium. And so doctors today said that it definitely would not cure anything, like Sean said. However, too much of it was bad, very very bad.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on your ailment and current health condition, you could die, or you could experience symptoms such as trouble breathing, dizziness, migraines, all sorts of crazy stuff. Now, they framed it as being from the treatment of the water, but it wasn't confirmed, but about 6 people did die on the property during that time. So it is thought that they died from the combination of their sickness and the water, but because of who owned the property, it was never confirmed if the water actually killed them or not. And behind it runs French Creek.
Yep. It's right on the banks.
At least 2 young men drowned right behind. Well, they made it seem like right behind the hotel in French Creek. They were not staying at the inn, and they weren't at the same time. They didn't know each other. They were years apart. Both were just swimming in French Creek, and they did drown. So that's at least 8 people to have died on or around the property itself immediately. A lot of history in a small little area there, and the fact that it was seen as the go-to wellness spa of its day is kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, even doing just the bit of research I did on this place, kind of went down the rabbit hole because, I've always heard of mineral springs, spas. Finding out that at this time, mineral springs were the rage. People didn't go to sporting events. You went to the mineral springs. Everybody was going to the mineral springs. And, the fact that this one was an extremely hot spot for people to visit was just insane to me. Because I honestly, now that the Riverside Inn isn't there, I don't really think of Cambridge Springs at all.
No. No. And correct me if I'm wrong, but a brewery sits on it now?
I believe
/
so.
Restaurant, something like that?
Yeah, I want to say that it is a brewery that's there.
I'm 80% sure. Yeah, with the Riverside gone, you don't even think of that anymore. And obviously the mineral water, spring, creek, whatever you want to call it, was there throughout the whole life of the hotel. So even after they stopped using it, like we've talked about before, you do have that running water.
Yeah.
Cutting through.
And these are, for lack of a better term, enriched waters.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that with certain minerals like Epsom salts and things like that, a lot of those are used in not only just spirituality, but in conjuring things. So, it's one of those where that could be, I guess, more of an attraction. I mean, as much as it attracted guests there, it's very possible it could be attracting, spirits there as well.
No, definitely. And so many people traveled there. I know only at least 8 people died. But, like we've talked about, if someone actually really enjoyed it, and they went back multiple times, it's not a stretch to think that their energy would be there, or even their spirit would just be well, I'm going to go back there after I die and stay there. But they did have some theories on ghosts that are there. So the first thing that the medium in the show believed is that there was 3 different types of spirits there. There were elderly folks, there were young folks, and then there were juveniles. Not going to get into all that. I don't want to spill my true feelings on this show, but interesting to note that they believed that one of the elderly ghosts was the ghost of the owner, and that was the most active elderly spirit, and that was one that would get really active if disrespect was happening to the inn. So definitely interesting there, I thought. I'll get to that one because that one's the toughest one for me here. Mark that I skipped that one for now. So, what's kind of crazy to me, and the one thing I did not like in the show, the medium tried to paint that the event happened at the inn, but it did not. So I do want to put that disclosure there before I finish the whole tale here. So not far from the inn, a female employee of a hardware store went missing. About 2 years after her disappearance, they found her dead body in the woods, hacked up by a machete. So they believe that she was hacked to death by a machete. Investigators believe that her boss was the culprit and that they were having an affair when she was alive. And that the reason she was killed is she wanted to come clean about the affair, she wanted to go public, things like that, and he killed her. They did question him, the cops did at the time, the investigators, but there wasn't enough to charge him. And suddenly during the investigation, he had to go on a business trip, but he was very secretive about what the trip was. Turns out he went somewhere along the East Coast. New Jersey sticks out to me, but I can't remember the exact place. And he was found sitting by a seawall facing the Atlantic Ocean with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. So again, that leads him to the belief that he did kill her. The medium said that she saw images. So they do believe that since it was so close to the inn, that the inn would have been a place that they met up for their affair.
Okay.
So that's kind of how the investigators and owners kind of tied the inn to it. But the medium saw flashes of violence, like a man strangling a woman. So she believes that there was actually some sort of altercation between the two at the inn. But there is no evidence of that at all. But yeah, so not far away there was her that was murdered. And then from the theater, shoes, props, and costumes would go missing and then reappear. And they believe that these are the ghost kids pulling pranks on them. The one thing that I don't know about, and it is definitely a possibility because I have seen these types of spirits and ghosts. They believe there is a water ghost or a ghost near the river that possesses people and forces them to drown themselves. Is what the medium believed. And it's rare. They are out there. I've seen them and kind of dealt with them. It's rare to have one of those try to possess people. Usually they work more with the water itself.
The one thing that I would say, though, in all of the time that the water was in this location, only 2 reported drownings.
Right.
And we're talking hundreds of thousands of people being in that water.
Even to the day it burnt down. Weddings. All sorts of events there. Kids running around.
People swimming in the water.
Right. Only 2 people. And the other thing that didn't lead me to believe that is her response to getting rid of that was for him to seek out a psychotherapist who was a medium. Yeah, my things exactly. She didn't offer to help at all, and she told, and I don't know, like,
what would
Sorry.
she do necessarily?
What is the difference? What qualifications does a psychotherapist medium have more than a medium?
She didn't specify, but the way she was kind of talking about it, I'm assuming she wanted the person to analyze the ghost. But even then, most of the times when you do try to cleanse one, dispel one, exorcise one, or banish one, or trap one, if it's already that bad, you don't analyze it all. You just go to work.
Yeah.
So it's very weird to me, too, that her answer, instead of even offering to help, was just, hey, pretty much find a therapist that's also medium for this ghost. Which, if you're one, let me know. I don't think any actually exist, because the science behind psychotherapy usually doesn't line up with mediumship at all. So, I mean,
You could be the first.
I don't know if I want to be the first if these are the people that are going to be calling me. But yes, that's just a few things I wanted to point out that the show did talk about and mention, in addition to the information that we had here.
I was never at the Riverside Inn.
Me neither. I didn't know it was even a thing until after it had burned down.
Like, I knew about it. Like, obviously I'd seen pictures of it. And then when it did burn down, I was like, oh, it was that place.
Yeah, I didn't even know.
I'll say I have family out in Cambridge Springs and some family friends, and never been there, but knew about it, had seen it before, and so I was knowing that there is a brewery there now. I was like, I'm interested in how that's
Interesting
all part of
fact.
this.
I couldn't find anything about the brewery being haunted. At all.
Honestly, after the Riverside Inn did burn down, there's nothing about the area.
Yeah.
Anything. All the ghost stuff has dried up. All the things about the area dried up. Heck, other than the actual stories about the building burning down, all the ghost stuff was at least years before that.
Yeah. And theories of mine are like we were kind of talking about a little bit ago. If these were spirits that enjoyed it and it burnt down, they just left.
Yeah, there's
Found a new place to stay.
If it was residual energy, the things that they were attached to are now gone.
And anything that was negative was probably cleansed in the fire. So
Yeah, anything trapped there was released. So, I mean, anything that was there probably was taken away by the fire, and now the brewery is just a new start.
yeah,
If
no
we're-
attachments to it.
If we're wrong and the brewery is incredibly haunted, please let us know, because there is just nothing at all
Yeah.
after it burns down about there being any ghosts at all. Like, no ghosts by the river.
Yeah.
And if there is something, we can have dinner at the brewery and
Yeah.
see if we.
See what we feel.
Yeah,
You can ask Applebee's. We rack up some pretty big bills sometimes.
Yeah.
that is true.
Or boys at the Apple Boys.
The more ghosts and haunts that are at the area, the more we will be willing to spend.
Yeah.
I am sad it burned down, because after learning all this, I'm like, man, that'd be so cool to go to.
And the fact that it was a historical landmark.
Mm-hmm.
And
That makes it.
and it's even worse knowing, the building was 127 years old. We don't have many buildings that are that old. We have some, but they've all been turned into completely different buildings, had facelifts. Like, this was basically the original design. Even reading about some of the architecture was really fascinating. Not much of it had to do with what we go over, but just the fact that it was such a unique building, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, and with it being so old, the owners even did their best to try to, not original, but try to keep it looking as how it would
Yeah.
in the original timeline too.
And to be fair, that is part of the thing, and that's what I know from actually knowing some people that work in historic buildings and in that process. When you get something marked as a historic building and it's covered under that, you cannot change fundamentally anything. It has to be as close to the original as possible. You can update materials so that it lasts longer, but you can't decide, oh, this green banister, I don't like it green, I want it painted pink. You can't do that if it's a historical building.
We're going open concept. No walls.
You cannot fundamentally change, so that is something that is part of the reason why a lot of historic buildings that we do have that are older never made it onto the register, so now they are these different buildings and they don't look like what they used to. So it's an semi-exclusive list, and it's sad that one of those happens to be gone.
Just thinking about the theater alone would have been gorgeous to see.
Oh, I would have loved to go in there.
All original.
And I mean, we're talking about how sad it is for us, the people that are still here. But from everything I've heard, creepiness aside of things crawling into bed with you and maybe pushing you out of the bed, nothing here seemed overly negative.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So this was just spirits that found a place that they were happy to be. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that the building hasn't changed. Maybe that's another reason that these spirits kept going there, because it was still a familiar location. But it's almost more heartbreaking that these spirits now don't have a home either.
Yeah, they were essentially evicted when the fire hit,
Unless they're at the brewery.
laying low.
Which again, brewery, let us know.
That'd be really cool to hear if there was some sort of activity at the brewery, even if like it was small things,
Yeah.
just to kind of know like, oh yeah, they're still there.
Maybe a server or bartender just be like, oh yeah,
Stuff gets knocked down.
at the end of the night or something, like little things like that would be.
Something innocuous.
Yeah.
No. So, if it was still standing and we had the chance to go there, what would you want to experience?
Nothing getting into bed with me.
Yeah, it's a special creepiness.
Not gonna lie, I'd be interested to see what it's like.
If you're awake as it's happening, it's probably
Yes.
different than if you're waking up.
That's
to it happening.
Yeah,
Right, and something spooning you now.
Yeah,
I'd rather be awake when it happens.
and witness it.
Realistically, I'd like to walk the property as it was.
Yeah.
That's for me. If we were able to, when it was around, I would have liked to just walk and see what it was like.
I would have loved to see or even hear the music in the ballroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or, see that haunted mansion scene of spirits just waltzing in the ballroom. Like, I love that stuff. Like, that's awesome.
I 100% agree. And like I would want to go to French Creek, and I want to see the feelings around there because, like you said, everything just sounds like spirits found a home.
Yeah.
And then you've got this one medium saying that there's something so dark and negative by the water. It doesn't add up with everything else. So like I would want to go there to see like what that actually felt like compared to the property, because that is vastly different, but it's still the property of the hotel. Like,
Yeah. I mean, even reading the stories about those haunted sleepovers they would have, like just to experience one of those, because just hearing about it, literally, you would spend all night catching your evidence, and then the next morning for breakfast, you were surrounded by people that were also investigating,
Yeah.
and you're sharing stories, and nobody's leaving terrified. This is all
It's a
just a
positive
really
experience.
exciting, positive thing, and nothing that I found was a negative story. Not a thing.
no, same here, and that's why I'm sad. We'll never be able to go there, and then it's just not there anymore.
Yep.
Can we spend the night at the brewery?
I don't see why not.
We are going camping at French Creek.
They do make those floating tents that
Right?
God,
perfect to
No.
to die in.
Yeah,
Floating caskets.
I am vetoing that one.
Get a
100%.
pontoon boat with a tent.
No. But I think that does it for the Riverside Inn. Definitely like and subscribe. Thanks for viewing.
Thanks, guys.
Stay in the light.